back on the show, Matt Hayes, he's got a new title since he's last joined the show, Senior National College Football Writer, USA Today Sports, and of course 1010XL Radio out of Jacksonville, one of our absolute favorites. Matt, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Michael. It's always great to visit and be with you guys. Love your show. Love being with you.
You are always a must-read. Just you never know what you're going to put out there. But recently you put out this opinion column here with a light schedule. Texas is quickly making SEC friends, or is that enemies? And quite frankly, Matt, you're saying what so many others have said, but you actually did some sourcing on this. But what made you want to write about Texas and the gift of a schedule that the SEC gave them?
Well, I did some reporting on actually way back in Destin in May. I spoke to some coaches and ADs who weren't happy about it. Look, let's do a little backstory real quick first. Texas, of course, as we all know, ran the Big 12, and the Big 12 did whatever Texas wanted. When the Big 12 first, formed, for goodness sakes, they moved their offices to the state of Texas because of Texas. They were the Big 8. They were in Kansas City, and they said, you know what? Well, now Texas is here, so guess what? Now we're in Dallas. And they bent over backwards to do everything they could to please Texas, including, when Texas threatened to go to the Pac-12 back in 2010, and we all know that story. And so Texas has been the front runner at the Big 12 and was the team that they did whatever they could to please. They kowtowed to Texas. There's no doubt about it. And to a lesser extent, Oklahoma, but Texas was the team. And I think everyone in the SEC knew that. And they all told me privately during Destin, which was the first really big moment of those schools being all together as I don't know, what's the best way to say this? As a total group, both sports and academics and administratively, that it wasn't going to happen this time around. Not in the SEC. No, we're all even. We're all on the same level. And that's been the beauty of the SEC and as well as the Big Ten. That's why I truly believe this too, Michael, that conferences are successful when everybody is equal, when Alabama is just important as Vanderbilt, right? When Mississippi State is just as important as Georgia. Everybody gets the same amount of money. Everybody's treated the same. And I think that's what's made the SEC so successful. I think that's what made the SEC championship game so successful. It's what really developed this conference. It's what the model that basically the Big Ten followed once it went into its to decide to go into to divisions and have the championship game. And it also exploded like that because in the Big Ten, Ohio State is just as important as Indiana, although some would argue that Ohio State kind of gets treated like Texas did in the Big 12, but that's another story for another time. Anyway, long story short, I had heard there were coaches and ADs were talking about this, and they were a little upset about this schedule. Texas's first year in the SEC, Texas did not play a true road game, Michael. True road game. Now, remember, they play Oklahoma and Dallas, which is a 50-50 game, which is just like the Florida-Georgia game in Jacksonville this weekend. They played that earlier in the month of October. They didn't play a true road game till last week, October 25. Michael, how long have you been covering the SEC? How long have you been following the SEC as a fan?
Covering it 10 years, as a fan, 30.
Do you ever remember an SEC school, ever, and I mean EVER, ever remember an SEC school playing its first true road game the last week of October?
Well, I'm glad you asked that because I heard you. Anybody that missed it, I recommend you go check it out. Matt was on with Feinbaum earlier this week, and you said the same thing, so I wanted to come prepared. I have looked at the last 10 years in the SEC. Right. It has happened one time.
Really? When?
But there's a little caveat there. It was Arkansas 2016. But the caveat is, of course, they always play that A&M game, and it's a neutral site. So right. If they didn't have that funky
similar, but game, still similar,
it is similar. But their first was October 22nd.
Okay,
at Auburn. But literally one out of 10 years. That was the only one I could find.
Well, I asked Paul the same thing, and Paul was like, "No, I've never even thought of it. Never heard of it." And so anyway, no one in the league had heard of it. That's the whole thing. And here's the best part: is to compound that, their first road game was at Vanderbilt, the annual tomato can in the SEC. Now Vanderbilt's having a nice year this year, right? But Texas' first true road game in the SEC is Vanderbilt. Texas got Georgia at home. Texas, their other marquee game was Florida. Again, Florida is not what Florida typically is. Also got Florida at home. So there were coaches and ADs that were a little upset about that, okay? Let's just put it that way. So I waited on this because I wanted to see how it would play out the first week, the first month and a half. And then I talked to some more coaches last week about it and then decided to write it. And it's obvious that Texas got a little break. Oklahoma, who came into the league with Texas, we all know from the Big 12, played its first true road game a month earlier than Texas at Auburn, which is one of the 3 toughest places to play in the league. They're not starting out at Vandy. They're not starting out at Mississippi State, and I love you folks at Mississippi State, so don't take that the wrong way, okay? But it's just odd, let's put it that way. It's a weird coincidence, huh? Which is what one coach said to me. A coincidence, isn't it? So believe me, that's kind of why I wrote it and what it was about. And the coaches were very, let's just say, the 3 coaches I talked to were very thankful that Georgia did what it did to Texas. Kind of put it in its place a little bit because that's kind of what happened there.
I thought maybe that was the most fascinating part of that, just the fact that there were coaches that were thrilled with how things went down when Georgia went down to Texas. But I guess I shouldn't be surprised by that.
Well, I'll also tell you this too, Michael. I don't want to single out Texas, but there are also coaches that are pretty thrilled at the way things are happening in Oklahoma as well. Because look, they're the 2, excuse me, they're the 2 new schools obviously in the league, right? They're also the 2 schools that for the last, 8, 9 months, it's all been about, now Texas and Oklahoma are in the SEC. And believe me, the other 14 are kind of like, what do you think we were before Texas and Oklahoma got here? Texas and Oklahoma got here. So there's a little of that as well. There's no doubt about it.
But going back to the scheduling real quick, how has that been perceived in Oklahoma? Because you want to, anyone can see Texas got a break here, but Oklahoma completely got the shaft. Look at
that schedule, right?
Every team in this conference that had preseason playoff expectations, they basically got all of them minus Georgia. How in the hell does that happen when Texas? It's complete opposite for Texas.
Yeah, Oklahoma also got Ole Miss, on the road. Oklahoma got Tennessee. That was the league was very quick to say, oh, wait a second, that's Josh Heupel. That's Oklahoma. That's a great game. Let's do that. So yeah, look, believe me, you're not the only one saying that. There are coaches and ADs that are saying this. That's kind of the whole point. It could be a coincidence, it was so funny that one coach said that. What a coincidence, right? And he's not the only one thinking that. Everybody's thinking that. Next year, same thing, same schedule, just flipped. Same thing. So if you're not happy with the schedule this year for Texas, guess what? Same thing next year. Yeah. And same thing for Oklahoma next year. And same thing, Georgia's schedule this year is brutal. Georgia's maybe as hard as Florida's. Both have the same schedule next year.
And any insight into how soon they could finally make a decision on going to a 9-game conference? Because I heard about a year ago that they were pretty far apart because about half the programs didn't want to do it, but now I hear it's pretty close to being a foregone conclusion.
I think, believe it or not, Michael, I think you might have a better shot at them sticking at 8 and convincing the Big Ten to go back to 8, because I think what they want is they want games that are important for the television partner, obviously, so they can generate more revenue, so they can help themselves deal with this 20 to 23 million annually that they have to pay for player salaries, which is coming. Mm-hmm. And that's coming next year. So they're trying to find a way to generate revenue. And I understand that. And I think, I'm all for it. Look, they're losing money with this. There's no doubt about it. So you can't lose that type of money and expect to continue to run at the level you've been running at for years upon years and fund other sports and fund other scholarships. And you can't do that. It just doesn't work. And, build facilities and do what you've been doing. You've got to find revenue. So that's their way of finding revenue is these non-conference games, this whatever you want to call it, the SEC Big Ten Challenge. But if you're at 9 games, Michael, I think the max you could play for at least, I mean at least 4 of your schools, and we know who those are, that's Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and Kentucky, who are in with state rivals from the ACC, and they do not want to give up those games, period. And they will not give up those games. So if you go to 9 games, then you're asking those 4 teams to play 9 games in the league, 1 game against their ACC rival, and 1 Big Ten game. So that's 11 games. You have to have a 12-game schedule. So you're basically giving them 1 pay game where they can get a breather in the schedule. And I just don't know that they're going to do that. I think that's the big push right now. It's a big pushback. And it's not just them that want to keep the 8-game schedule. I think there are as many as there might even be like 9 or 10 that want to keep the 8-game schedule, that would prefer the 8-game schedule. Now, the question is, can they convince the Big Ten to move back to the 8 games? That's the question. Because if they can, then you're talking about legit, you could play as many as 18 to 22 to 24 games against the Big Ten every year, non-conference games. And those games would be gigantic. And then here's the key, Michael. Then you sell that package as a standalone package. And then it's a standalone package you sell separately from your media rights deal. And then then you're really starting to talk about earning revenue. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to figure out ways to generate revenue, and that's a great way to do it. We'll see what happens with the schedule. My guess is the SEC is going to stick at 8. That would be my guess.
Interesting. Okay.
Unless ESPN just absolutely offers them just an ungodly amount of money to go to 9.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be one of the biggest stories in the SEC, over the next year for sure. But
I'll tell you something else too, Michael. I don't mean to interrupt you. Here's something else. Believe it or not, Greg Sankey, who gets a lot of grief about being the guy that's ruining college football, he likes the fact that the league can play group of 5 games because you're helping group of 5 teams. You're helping their revenue as well. They're coming into your stadium and they're getting $1 million. They're getting $1 million plus to come play games. The SEC presidents like that. They like the fact that they can, help other schools. So I don't know, like everybody thinks these guys, the SEC and the Big Ten, are running away. It's not that they're running away. They're trying to survive. That's number one. And number 2, they don't want to move away from that. The Big Ten presidents are like that as well. They don't want to move away from games against MAC schools, which traditionally they've helped support MAC programs. So, and I'm not saying this is big magnanimous gesture by them and they're these great people. All I'm saying is they want to still be in a situation where they can help the lower level of Division I.
Mm. Well, obviously you do radio 1010XL out of Jacksonville. I wanted to ask you about Florida, Georgia. What's the future there? They're building a new stadium, right? And what percentage chance would you give it to keep that game down there on an annual basis?
100%. Well, I'll tell you why. Honestly, money. It's money. You're talking about those schools probably earn or drive, I should say, $3-4 million for home games. Probably what they get. This city, once the stadium is rebuilt and begins, the first year of the new stadium will be 28. I think right now they get $6 or $7 million each per game, which is double what they get. They double what they get for a typical home weekend. All right. Once 28 rolls around, it's going to be a lot more than that. Because then because the city of Jacksonville can generate more revenue from that new facility with all those, fancy suites and advertising. And so the city will be able to generate more money. More money will go to Florida and Georgia. I don't think that thing goes anywhere. It's difficult if you're the AD at Florida and you're the AD at Georgia, or if you're the president of each school and you see, all right, well, we can earn $3 or $4 million, which we typically earn for a home game every other year. We can do that and go back to home sites, or we can earn, let's say, 7 million, 6 or 7 million every year. So it's a difference of every 2 years, you either earn whatever, it's somewhere in between 6 and 7 million. You either earn 12 to 14 million, or you earn 6 to 8 million. In this age of everybody's trying to find revenue, yeah, that game's not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe that Georgia is the favorite to win it all? Because, again, they look fantastic. Well, not on offense, but they look fantastic against Texas. They've roped everybody back in. But that game has really kind of been the outlier for much of their season. I still can't believe people give me a hard time for saying Texas is going to whoop them, because everything we had seen up to that point suggested that's what was going to happen.
Right. Yeah. I think it is. Georgia's at the point where Alabama was for all those years under Nick, is that they need to keep that motivational level really high. And of all the things Kirby has done so great over the years, that's it. Nick's greatest thing that he did at Alabama was convincing players year after year after year that, I know you got the gold at the top of that mountain by winning it all last year, but guess what? There's even better gold at the mountain, on top of the mountain this time around. And Kirby's there. I think this year he's had a problem of getting these guys dialed in 4 games, and they're kind of like sleepwalking through some, but they were ready in Texas, boy. I mean, how many teams do you know could have their star quarterback throw 3 picks, have 9 drops by their receivers, and be up 24-0 in the second quarter on the road against number 1? It just doesn't happen. So I think to answer your question, if they're dialed in, Michael, and they're motivated and ready to go, I don't think anybody beats them.
Mm-hmm. Well, all right, last thing for you, Matt. Really appreciate your time. Billy Napier's got some goodwill. The team's fighting hard. DJ Lagway's showing a ton of promise. The defense, which has been a train wreck, is actually, showing signs of life here. But and I think I already know what you'll say, but I'm going to ask it for fun anyway, because I know this fan base. You know them a lot better than I do. If they lose to Georgia, if they lose to Texas, they lose that LSU, and then I don't even care what happens to the rest. They're going to run his ass off, don't you think?
I think if he can get to 7 somehow, Michael, which to me is, look, I've been saying this all along. If you're Florida and you have the just huge advantage of the geographical recruiting footprint that you have, the huge advantage of being one of the top 10 NILs, and they are. All you got to do is go to the NCAA site and look and see the top 10 NIL producing schools. So all this idea that you hear out there in the ether and the internet, where all the experts are, that Florida doesn't have NIL money, trust me, they do. Okay, so if you have that recruiting footprint, you have that money, that support, you have the facilities they have, that you can win there with the right guy. All right. There's no way in hell you should settle for 7 wins. No way. There's no way in hell you should settle for that. Would make him 7-5. 7-5 would make him 18-19 in 3 years. 18-19. If they win a bowl game, then he's 19-19 in 3 years. Okay. There's no way Florida should settle for that. So I'm with you. Okay. I think they should fire him if he doesn't get to, I would say 8, and I don't even like 8. I don't even like the idea of 8 wins, because you're literally lowering the bar every single year because, we had a tough schedule. The schedule was really tough, Michael. Remember what Spur used to say about the schedule? Spur used to go, tough schedule, they got to play us.
Right.
Florida's not there anymore. Florida isn't at the point where they're saying they've got to play us. Okay, that's what Florida's got to get back to. I think he needs 3 wins the rest of the way. If he can get 3 wins the rest of the way, which will get him to 7, I think he's going to keep his job. But that also means, let's say he beats Florida State. By the way, not a given. On the road in Tallahassee, I don't care that Florida State is what they are. That's not a given, that game. But we'll just give him that one, okay? So that's 1. So he needs 2 wins out of Georgia, at Texas, LSU at home, Ole Miss at home. He needs 2 wins from those 4 games and the Florida State game, and I think 7 wins will save it. Now, they're playing much better defensively. They're running the ball better. I don't think it's going to help against Georgia. I don't think it's going to help against Texas. He might be able to steal a game, LSU or Ole Miss. I don't know if it's going to help there either, but we'll see.
Yeah, when the expectations are the same as at Florida as they are at Arkansas and South Carolina, you got a real problem on your hands. But
Michael, I mean, I mean, David Whitley, who's the columnist in the Gainesville Sun. I love David, longtime friend of mine. You know, he's writing 6-6 is going to save it. 6-6. Imagine that. Imagine like you're the Florida coach and you're at 6-6 and you're all right. We got you, man. Let's go another year. That's ridiculous. And I like Billy. I think Billy's a good guy. I think Billy has done a lot for that program as far as structurally and build out. But man, operationally, it's a mess. Still, Michael, they can't do the right thing on special teams or the field goal at the end of the first half against Tennessee wins that game. It never gets to overtime.
Right.
It gets there. So I don't know how you can continue to look at these things and say, all right, operationally, we've got to go in here. You just don't.
Yeah, I guess they left the mat down in Gainesville. All right, Matt, I appreciate you. Before you go, tell my audience how to follow you and how to find your work.
All right, you can follow me very easily on X. It's at Matt Hayes CFB and usatoday.com.
All right, thank you so much, Matt. Really appreciate your time, and reach out anytime you need something. Always happy to return a favor.